Start the recording. Yeah. Hey, Jacob. What's up? Good morning. Welcome back to Ant 415. If someone's in the hall, please come on in. Yeah, Lauren. It is. Come on in. They've updated it. Sorry. But yeah, we're in here. Yeah, welcome back, everybody. Ethnographic methods. We're gonna talk a little bit about what are ethnographic methods today. We'll also introduce the textbook by Bernard and get started on everything. So let's take a look at the syllabus. We're already down here. Welcome. We're going to start on chapter 1 today. We probably won't get through it. So if you haven't finished reading chapter 1, we're going to continue that next week, and we'll talk more about that. Also, remember your discussion board number 1 is due on today, Friday at midnight. I think most people have already done it. And if you're in more than one class or you've already been in a class with me, it should be real easy because you've already done it. Okay. Yeah. So let's jump right into it. We're going to talk today about what is ethnography, how we use it, who uses it, what are the different types of methods, and is ethnography and anthropology more generally a science or is it a humanities? So big questions. We'll figure it out. All right. So this is my printed off version of Bernard. Everybody got your Bernard? Everybody picked it up? Or it's on the internet? Print it out, look it up, start reading it. It's a big book. We're going to be going through it for those of you who aren't here. Almost like book club, right? We're going to read a chapter a week and then we will discuss. It's not going to be like intro where you're like, ethnography, look at this definition, write it down. This is a picture of someone who did ethnography. Yeah, John. Oh, they didn't? They don't have any copies? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and you can also find it on the internet. See how much it's running right now. Yeah. How much is it? Amazon has it to rent for $20 or to buy for $68. So hopefully it's not terrible. That's the newer version. Even I'm sure you can find an older version for even cheaper. But hopefully you can find. Yeah, that's the 6th edition. There was also a 7th. So we're all the way back here in 4th. I'll probably have to switch it up one of these years and move to the future if I can find a new copy. But yeah, so you should be able to find one for minimal cost. And I think it's a great book. I use it in my own field work still, and still use it as a resource. So hopefully you pick that up or at least enjoy the downloaded copy. It's very big if you print it out though. It's like this. It's a big stack. So like I said, we'll be going through it. I think it's good to kind of just go through and underline things. Those of you who are in theory, it's going to be real similar to how we did things in there. Basically, I read the chapter, I underline things. I put stars next to them. I put question marks. I put exclamation marks and all kinds of little symbols. And then in class, I'll kind of flip through and hopefully find something interesting for us to talk about. Yeah, Megan. Okay. Okay. That's fine. So we're going to start off with a big top level question, which is good. You're in a class called ethnographic methods. What do we mean by ethnographic methods? What is ethnography first, and what types of ways would we conduct it? What do you think? Yeah, Taylor. Studying groups of people. Yeah, is it, what's the difference between ethnography and ethnology? Everybody's taking intro to cultural, right? I think so, right? Mostly. You're in it? Yeah. You'll get it. You might want to help her out, give a more specific definition. Ethnography versus ethnology. Yeah, Taylor. No. Jose, what do you think the difference is between ethnography and ethnology? I know you've graded this quiz before, so hopefully you know it.
Knowledge is like certain characteristics, like anything they do, either religion or how they do their rituals. Where ethnology is studying the whole thing, the whole culture, the whole life, the whole livelihood.
Almost getting closer. Ethnology. What is ethnology? That seems like the one people have a hard time nailing down. No. No. John, what do you got? Anything? Ethnology?
Sure. I'm pretty sure that ethnology is deep inquiry, like interview type questions.
Nope. Ethnology. Megan. Yeah, what's Google? Yes, and that involves a comparison, right? So the easiest way to remember it is ethnography is a study of one culture at one particular place in time, and ethnology is a comparison. And that comparison can either be between two different cultures, right? So I'm going to compare and contrast Belizeans who live in Belize and Belizeans who live in San Francisco. They migrated there, now they work there. Well, is their culture different? How is it the same? I could also compare and contrast one culture maybe over time. So I might think about how is it in the 30s versus how is it today in the same village or something, right? Ethnology is about contrast. Ethnography is about doing a specific study of a culture in one particular place and time. Oftentimes that's focused on one particular aspect. I'm going to focus on chocolate farming. Obviously, I do lots of things besides chocolate farming, but the book is already 300 pages, so we've got to draw a line somewhere. Other ones are more broad, especially earlier ethnographies. When you roll into a village in the Trobriand Islands and no one has ever written anything about these people before, they're more broad, right? There might be a chapter on, my master's is a little more like this. There's a chapter on religion, there's a chapter on farming, there's a chapter on kinship, there's a chapter on land tenure or something like that, laws and judicial stuff. But it's still focused on one particular culture. And so that's what we're going to be doing in here. Oftentimes, the difference between ethnography and ethnology is a matter of practice, but the difference between who's doing ethnography and who's doing ethnology is often a matter of seniority. When you're young, undergrad, grad student, young junior researcher, usually you're doing ethnography. You go off, do research in one place. Hard to do contrast if you've never gone anywhere before. So you're going to do an ethnography, right? It's your first time. I'm going to go to Belize and I'm going to live in a village and I'm going to write all about it. Usually it's more senior scholars who do ethnology. Why do you think that is? Why, when you have emeritus, your office is stacked to the roof with papers and books and nobody can even find you in there, and you have a dot matrix printer and your old DOS computer? Why is it those people who usually are doing ethnology? Yeah.
Cool, John. No. You.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
No, you're fine.
John's not used to having another talker in class. Yes, exactly, right? And you got to read lots of books and travel. Usually by the time you're a senior scholar, you've gotten tired of your first research place and you've moved on to a second or third research site. You've also read all these books over the course of your teaching career and taught about all these different cultures, right? Then you can compare. Just like after I've lived here, I have a better understanding of what goes on in New Mexico, and I can compare that to Belize or something like that, right? So as junior scholars, up and coming future professors, hopefully someday you will all be standing up in a lecture like this or doing something similar or working in industry or doing something with the methods you learn in this class. We're going to be doing ethnography. You'll have the opportunity to both practice in here with your classmates. So usually my idea is the first couple weeks in this book, if you've looked at it, are all about kind of the prep or the setup for research. So if you look at the syllabus or the table of contents for Bernard, right here, This week and into next week, we'll talk about what is ethnography, what is anthropology, how does ethnography fit into anthropology, how does it get used by other disciplines like sociology, psychology, culture studies, things like that. Then we'll think about kind of what is research, how do we actually do research, how do we know what we know, how do we come up with questions, what types of research questions are good, which ones are not so good, how do we operationalize them, meaning how can we go from an idea like I think religion affects cacao farming to how can we actually test that, or can we even? But then in the middle of the semester, starting kind of, I don't know, week 5 or so, we'll be doing methods. So we'll be spending a week on each of the different methods. We'll talk about questionnaires, we'll talk about surveys, we'll talk about pile sorts and interviews and participant observation, things like that, if you're writing field notes. So you're gonna have the opportunity to do that. You're gonna practice them in here. We usually all lecture for a day or two, and then we'll have a practicum where you have a chance to interview each other or make a questionnaire or do the pile sorts and put animals into different piles or whatever. And then you'll have a homework where you actually get to go out in the field and you work on it for your paper. So that's kind of how this class is structured. And so we'll have an opportunity to kind of do deeper understanding of each of these different types of methods. But yeah, when you hear ethnography, you hear someone say, I did an ethnography. What comes into your mind, or what pops in your mind about what they actually did? What were they doing there? So I did an ethnography. I was in a Belizean village for a year doing ethnography. What did I actually do? What do you think?
Living alongside people.
Yeah, participant observation. That's one of the methods that we're going to talk about in here. And what does that include? You say, yeah, I did 2 years of participant observation with my chocolate farmers. What does that actually mean? What do you think, Taylor? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the mundane. That's a great key word there, Ethan.
And live as part of their culture, although knows whether it's mentally or on outside or whatever.
Yeah.
What they do on day.
Yeah, good. And that's basically what I did. I want to talk about these different methods and then kind of show my own experience or talk about that. So I did participant observation, did it both for my master's, my undergrad thesis, and my PhD, each one being kind of longer than the last. And in participant observation, right, my project was to understand religious and economic change among my cow farmers, right? So to do participant observation, I had to live in a community. The first 3 months there, I didn't actually. I lived in town and I worked in the chocolate grower's office. And I could do the other methods that we're going to talk about. I did surveys, I did interviews, things like that. But I didn't really, it was hard to do participant observation. Why do you think it might have been hard if I was living in town and then commuting out once a week to a village that was like 3 hours away? Why was it hard to do participant observation those first 3 months? What do you think, Megan? Oh, Taylor, you're drinking.
When you're 3 hours away.
How do I know what they ate for breakfast?
Yeah, you're missing out on.
Right? I didn't get to work till work started at 9. We get in the truck, we get out there at noon. We got to be home by 5. So that means we got to leave by 3 or 2:30 at least to get home. So what do they eat for breakfast? What do they eat for dinner? What do they do at their nighttime church services? Who knows? Yeah.
Scripted.
Yeah.
You can't properly describe or understand this culture and this environment that you're.
Yeah.
Because you're not actually.
Yeah. What do you think, Ethan?
It's kind of like the issue with veranda, like.
Yeah, it's veranda. Very good. What is veranda ethnography? And that's what I started out doing, actually.
It's like treating anthropology like a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
You go in, you go to work, you study people, and then you leave for the night. And the issue is like one, like they were saying, you miss out a lot of parts of the culture that you could be seeing directly with them. And two, it makes it harder for you to build up that trust so that they'll be willing to explain those parts of their culture.
What do we call that trust? What's the anthropology word for that? Not reciprocity. Rapport, yeah, rapport building activities, right? So even if I'm studying Maya chocolate farming, why do I go to church? Maybe I'm not studying religion. Or why do I go eat at somebody's house? Or why do I help somebody in their potato patch, even though I'm doing chocolate? Yeah, neat, clean boundaries, right? You build favors up, you make friends and stuff. You know, like it's all part of that doing ethnography.
Chocolate. There's a bunch of chocolate on the altar at the Catholic
And
ceremony.
then you're like, what does this mean? Yeah, right? Because culture is not just disconnected little economics, religion, kinship, family, food, right? It's all connected. Let's talk about what Ethan brought up, actually. Do you remember, Ethan, what are the 3 stages of in the history of ethnographic research, right? You mentioned one of them already. What were they?
There was
How we did ethnography. Yeah, and what's that all about? Reading books, right? Good readers. That's the first one. That's back in the 1800s, right? Lewis Henry Morgan, right, developed his famous hierarchy of civilization, right, from savagery to barbarism to civilization, right? And while he did a little bit of ethnography, most of that was based on armchair, right, reading books and thinking about, oh, how was the ancient Greek civilization? What were ancient Egyptians like? What were ancient, people who live in Mexico like? Yeah. And what do you think, John?
I'll say correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also sort of deeply tied to the fact that world travel was not the same thing that it is today. So oftentimes what we were writing from was, Captain Cook and people like that who risk their lives and sail across the world on a ship and then go get killed.
Yeah, right.
And they would take their writings.
There was definitely a distinction between the gentleman scholar and the adventurer, missionary, soldier out there on the frontier, right? It wasn't often the same people doing this because, if you're a gentleman scholar, you're in Oxford and Cambridge and have a manor to take care of. And if you're a soldier in the military or a missionary or a doctor, you're not going to have those same things. Yeah.
One thing to shoot at is like, I think we're kind of like leading into this, different experiences and motivations.
Yep. And how would that make a difference, right? Depending on what we call positionality. We're going to talk about this a lot this semester.
Like a missionary, a soldier, and a convert all going to the exact same village.
Yep.
And write 3 very different.
How might they be different, right? So the soldier comes in and writes, what about this village? What would they might focus on? Yeah, right. Oh, this is their tactics. These are their types of spears they have. This is maybe their hierarchy, who's the general and how do you get to be that? Is it hereditary? What are their combat tactics? Are they hand-to-hand versus spears or I don't know, whatever, right? Yeah.
So then what are the 3 stages?
The first is the armchair, and we'll get to the other 2 in just a moment.
Oh, okay. So I thought we went over.
Just that. We're just on the first ones. Yeah, John.
How does I can't remember what you said specifically. Was the theorist in 1970 that did that fun thought experiment? What if it was or
Marshall Solins and Obia Secretary debate? Yeah. Yeah.
It's not that Cook's just writing like Cook and his shipmates are just writing about the military, but like, they have a very specific position they're approaching from. So there's only a certain side of civilization.
For sure. Yeah, right.
About like internal house dynamics, how divisions of labor work. That's not.
Yeah, they weren't interested in that, right? And they were just doing kind of the explorer thing, right? So positionality is really important. So how would a soldier see it? How might a missionary see it? What would they might focus on? Yeah.
They might focus on the lifestyle and how the people's lifestyle there and their general life conditions can be improved by that missionary.
Yeah, right. How is your religion wrong? How might changing your religion be beneficial or change your culture? Yeah. Yeah. And do you think that might be an objective understanding of that religion? Do you think that missionary might write an objective report?
Oh, no, I don't think that.
Why not?
And this thing of the personal
A bias, yeah.
They're there for the purpose of.
Yeah, right. And that's like I mean, that's an easy one, right? So missionaries probably have a bias against these religions where they go and they, oh, it's fetishism. That's, idol worship or whatever. But we all have biases. And that's the important thing, is not to like beat up on missionaries, but to think about when we do our research here, maybe what are our biases, right? If we're from a big city, not from a big city, but a city, which all cities are big compared to here, right? Maybe I have a bias not against, but I have a bias of rural life, right? Maybe I've never lived on a farm before. Maybe I don't know what it's like to have a well instead of just like turn on your tap and get fresh drinking water or something like that. Maybe I'm not used to having to drive 150 miles to go to Target, right? All these things are going to be biases, whether they're like, we often think of bias as like prejudice, but also it means just like blind spots. So we have to think about what are our blind spots, and what were the blind spots of some of these ethnographers that we're going to talk about. So that's the first, right? The armchair. I read a book in my comfy armchair in my library. There's a library where I went to grad school at UVA. It looks like Hogwarts. It was like the best. It was like had like fancy chairs and stained glass windows and very tall bookcases with few books on them, so you could like see the gilding on them and not have them all crunched together, right? It's a great place to hang out and read ethnographies of other cultures. Super comfortable. There's a coffee shop downstairs. There's like vaguely classical music, quiet from some other place that you can't see. It's great. Why don't we still do that? Why, if the armchair is so very comfortable, why should we leave? Yeah, Sam, what do you think?
Because it was comfortable.
It's
Or
comfortable.
Any of the work.
Yeah.
Like going out there and studying or told you just read one book and then just like created a theory out of that.
Yeah.
Even though they have no idea of like what you're really saying, you just kind of making shit up.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think, Ethan?
And kind of like John said, traveling now is a lot easier than it used to be. So, like, back when there were like armchair anthropologists were still, perspective, they didn't really have the travel opportunities. So
Mhm.
they were the only way they could do their work effectively. But now, just because it's comfortable doesn't mean that you shouldn't go for other options.
Yeah.
But it's not very collaborative.
And it's amazing how much that's changed, like in the course of just the last century, right? Levi Strauss died in 2010 or so while I was in grad school. And his book, Triste Tropiques, there's this whole section of him crossing the Atlantic. The Nazis come into Paris and take over, and he has to go to South America. And it's 30 days on a boat, like to go from Europe to South America, and it's amazing amount of time. And now when I go to Belize, remember when I came home last time, I got up, caught the 3:30 in the morning bus, got to the airport or the town by 5:30 or 6, caught the 7 a.m. plane to Belize City, back on the plane to the US, to Miami, and then Orlando, and I was home by 3:30 in the afternoon. It was like a wild to like go from, sleeping in a hammock in a village in the middle of the night to back home with my parents or something, within the course of 12 hours, when these old-time ethnographers would spend just weeks or months or longer to get just to their field site. But yeah, I think there has been kind of this switch, right, between the easy, the comfortable, the clean armchair anthropology to ethnography, especially modern ethnography, being right. You're in the dirt, you're in the mud. I've never been so dirty as living in a community where you bathe in a creek, and the creek, it's during dry season, the creek's only this deep, so your nose, when you lay down in the creek, is still sticking out of the water, and there's people washing dishes and killing chickens upstream. It's all just kind of floating down, right? And that brings us to the second stage. So armchair ethnography, anthropologists realized pretty early on by the 1890s or so that armchair anthropology wasn't going to cut it. And they started to do veranda anthropology. What's veranda anthropology? And who's somebody that we talked about in theory, if anybody remembers, who did armchair anthropology? What is armchair first? Or, yeah, veranda, sorry. Veranda.
Like your 9 to 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
So
stay within the city.
Yeah, it's like the 90% version, right? Like I went to Belize, and not even the big city. Like I was in a small city that was like smaller than Clovis, right? It was the district capital at the end of the road. They didn't even build the road there until the 80s or the 90s, right? You had to take a boat before that. It seemed like the end of the world, but for people living in the villages, it was the big city. It's where you went to use the internet. It's where you went to like buy things, and you went to like see people and meet a girlfriend or a boyfriend who wasn't from your same village and probably related to. It was like the big happening thing, right? And so veranda anthropology kind of started as a movement against that comfy, cushy armchair stuff. Like we're gonna travel and we're gonna go somewhere. We're gonna learn, right? W.H.R. Rivers, we talked about at the beginning of last semester. He was kind of one of the famous veranda anthropologists, right? He traveled far. And like I said, this is the days where if you were going to take a boat to India from, England, it was going to take you a month or two. And he went to India, studied there, also in the Torres Islands, the Torres Straits, which is between New Guinea and Australia. So, I mean, you've traveled halfway around the world, but you're still a British gentleman. I'm going to stay in the trading post. I'm going to stay in the missionary outpost. I'm going to stay in the fort. Why? Why do I do that? Yeah, Ethan.
I think that when it came to anthropologists first starting to travel, they probably had this fear of like the dangers of spending the night in the village.
Oh, for sure. Somebody might kill you or steal your stuff or be a cannibal or a headhunter or something. I don't know, right? Especially if you've never met these people before.
Like, just as a general thing, I think they knew they had to get out of the comfort zone, but they didn't want to get too far out of it.
Yeah.
Too far out of it.
They still like to have tea and stuff, and it's really nice to be able to like write your field notes in peace. Like when I did my master's, we kind of did that too. We'd be out, and then at the end of the night, we'd come back and sit at the computer and type up what we learned about that day, little expeditions. So it was nice to like decompress and have a beer with the other Americans and go out to eat and do that kind of stuff. But still, doing your ethnography during the day. Yeah.
I think that also. The trust between cultures is not there.
For sure.
There was no.
And why don't you think there was trust? Do you think these people, yeah, right? These aren't just like, I'm going to go on vacation here. This is like a colony, right? If you look at where ethnographers did their field work, it's always in the colonies of the countries that they worked for, right? So the British people were going to Australia, New Zealand, to India, to Kenya, to South Africa. Why? Why would you go to those places if you're British? Yeah, colonies are British. There's going to be some colonial officials there. There'll be some people who speak English. You get to be basically protected by the soldiers and the governor and all that stuff. And then the French anthropologists are going to French West Africa or somewhere like that. Yeah. Yeah, definitely, right? A lot of these early expeditions were funded by colonial governments or universities with the purpose of we're going to civilize these people, or we're going to open up trade with them, or we're going to convert their religion. So we need you to go there and figure out who these people are and what they do and how they're organized. Yeah, Ethan.
Like from their perspective, it's kind of like the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Like on the one hand, you're not in London. You're not just sitting in an office reading books and theorizing.
Yep.
At the same time, you're still in British territory.
Yep.
And if it goes the wrong way, then you can find
You're in a fort and there's soldiers paid there to protect. Yeah. And I think you're right that like, if you've never left London and I come back from the Trobriand Islands and I was like, man, it was crazy. There was headhunters. There was like people with, sailing these canoes around and going, having warfare and stuff. And you've never left England. You're like, wow, that seems legit, right? Because I went all the way there and I saw those people with my own eyes. But then when we get to that third stage, right, it seems kind of lacking. Yeah, Taylor.
How reliable that research truly be at that time, especially when they're going to colonize?
Yep. What do you think might be some problems with doing ethnographic research in those situations?
It's already been colonized, so a different culture has already come in, constructed the culture and the environment.
Yep.
What you're studying now is not what you want to be studying.
Yeah, and
You're
it's,
studying your culture mixed with this culture. You're
Yep.
studying you're not looking at like the culture that was there. You're not looking at their culture.
Yep.
You're looking at a blood.
and it's why often, and or especially early ethnography, they do what's called salvage ethnography. What is salvage ethnography? Yeah, that's it.
I assume, based on what we were just talking about, that it would be trying to find the original, like what it originally looked
Yeah.
like before, I don't know, specifically colonization or other cultures had come
Yeah, just
in.
back in the day, what was your life back when you were like more traditional? What do you think, Megan? Saying about Boaz? Yes, Franz Boaz. Yes.
He went up to this. Bunch of people like,
Yep.
gather as much information as absolutely possible.
Yeah, that was the whole paradigm of Boasian anthropology, right? The early 20th century, salvage everything you can, write it in a book, because these people's language will be lost. The religion will be lost. The way of life, when they had started eating canned foods, they're not going to be hunting seals anymore, right? We got to salvage it all. And we're going to put it in books in order to save it for the future. Yeah.
Almost kind of like putting together a puzzle.
Yep.
Like, you have all these broken pieces of a pre-colonial culture, and after colonialism, you just have to sort of try to fit them together to get a big picture of what this culture was like before your.
Yeah. I think, John.
I was gonna get down to the fact, this is, why is arrayed anthropology happening in colonies? This all, of course, ties to the larger issue of money.
Definitely.
It's paying for you to go travel,
Far and a lot of money, right?
especially British anthropology, theory. A lot of the time, it's not like innocent of just studying what they thought was the coolest culture. That was sort of the American anthropology vibe. It's like, I'm just gonna go hang out with the Inuits or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But out in Britain, they had like practical goals, like we had a rebellion amongst these.
Yeah, the New Air by,
There was some eagle priests.
Yeah.
Go,
Yep.
Find out what those eagle priests are, so we don't have a rebellion.
yeah, if you remember E. Evans Pritchard, right? He was kind of the archetypal colonial anthropologist. We talked about him last time, right? He wrote The New Air. He also wrote Magic Witchcraft Among the Azande. And both of those books were written because the British government was like, we need to go there and figure out what's going on with these people, why they keep rebelling, and how we can stop it from happening again. So figure out what their social organization, who's in charge, why do they keep going to war against their neighbors? We can't figure it out. So like go there and do this, right? When you do veranda anthropology, what might you miss, or what might be left out, or what might people tell you that might not be completely true? Literally anything, right? How do you know, right?
Pretty much the culture categories. One, what people do when you're not there.
Yep.
And two, what
And what kind of things maybe we already talked about what people do when you don't there, breakfast, lunch, nighttime. I mean, that happened to me. We're like living in the town, and then eventually after living in the village, people will be like, oh, you want to see this magic ritual? It happens at midnight. If you don't live there, you're not going to happen, right? You're not going to drive out for that. They're not going to trust you. What other kind of things maybe do they not trust ethnographers with if you're not around all the time, if you don't have good rapport? What do you think, Megan? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, the interpreter problem, right? It might be a simple mistranslation. I might use this word instead of that word. It could also be like an ellipse. Like this happened all the time. My buddy spoke Mopan, Quechua, Spanish, English, and a couple other languages. So he'd go with me when we'd go to Quechua villages. And so he could talk to them in Quechua and then translate, because I didn't speak Quechua, just Mopan. And then the guy would talk, into this one guy is telling a story, a really cool old story. And he talked for like 5 minutes, and then my friend would be like, yeah, and he said that they did this, and it'd just be like a 2 sentence. And I'd be like, but like, what was all those other words? Like, I want to know like literally, right? And then other times, either with an interpreter or from the people you're talking to, maybe there's things that they feel shy or embarrassed about, right? Maybe they know that you're a good Christian British guy, and even though the missionaries have supposedly converted this tribe to Christianity, maybe you still practice the old religions at home. Why might they not tell you that if you're a Veranda type person? Yeah. Yeah, right.
Get caught as a Christian school.
Yeah, especially if there's not like religious pluralism, right? If you can, we think that's just like far away stuff, but even here in New Mexico, people were still being arrested for practicing Native American religions until the 1920s. So not just like, oh, Africa, Australia, like it's here in New Mexico, right? So people, if you're only there part-time or they're not really sure about you, often will tell you what you want to hear, right? And that can be with religion or something like that, but it can also be basic stuff like, how much corn did you grow last year? And why might someone tell you an incorrect number? How much corn did you grow last year? Seems like a simple question. There's a lot of reasons why that answer you get might not be correct. What are some of those answers? You guys can just fight amongst yourselves. Maybe you're going to tax them, right? You're going to tell the government that these people grow a lot of corn, so you should raise taxes on them. What else? Yeah. I'm like a super awesome, badass farmer. I grew like 1 million acres last year, right?
Yeah, or like they grew more last year, this year they grow as much, maybe they have taxes or like number information that is wrong between the two years, so you need to fix that and lie about that.
Yeah, we think so.
Or maybe like either you or someone else stole from your truck, you don't want to know that.
Yeah.
More or like less number.
What about if there's no malicious intent? Why might someone tell you an answer that they might even think is correct, but maybe is incorrect? I said, how much cacao did you sell last year? I sold 550 pounds last year. But it turns out maybe you didn't. Maybe you only sold 300 pounds. What might be the reason? You're bad at math. You didn't keep any of the receipts. And this happened when I worked for the Cacao Growers Association. I was trying to they had how many acres and how many trees people had. And I was trying to match up production data. So I knew all the farmers, I knew where their farms were, and I knew how many trees they had. So I kind of had an idea of how much you should be selling, right? If you have 1,000 7-year-old cacao trees, there's an equation you can plug in. Trees should yield this much per year under organic, and you have this many trees times this minus losses comes out to this, right? I had a vague idea, but I wanted actual numbers. Well, what happened was I was going to use receipts. It's supposed to be great, right? They give a copy when you sell your chocolate. They give you a copy of receipt, and they put a copy in a box. And I was like, that's great. There's 2 copies. I'm going to find them and I'm going to put them together. I'm going to count how many are on the receipts and see what we got. But the receipts never matched up, right? Sometimes they were high, sometimes they were low. People lost them. Oftentimes they were like eaten by rats or used as toilet paper or just drawn on by little children. Like there was a million reasons nobody had bookkeeping or like it hadn't been like a thing. So the numbers never matched up, right? Which, yeah, Ethan.
I'll just add on, maybe asking the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
You ask the fisherman how much corn you grew last year, how's he supposed to know?
Yeah, right. Or even you can be like, how many people, what percentage of the village is Catholic versus Protestant? Do you think it might make a difference if I ask a Catholic person versus a Protestant person that question? Yeah, right. Because they interact with their groups more. So they might be like, yeah, everybody I know is Protestant, right? But it might only be 50-50 or something like that. Yeah.
Can I just say, I was like not prepared how volatile the relationship with Protestants and Catholics was.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was
I wasn't ready for it.
the basis
And
of
I
the
was
whole
walking
Civil War.
right across the street from each other, screaming, the Protestants are gonna go to hell. And the Catholics screaming the same thing.
Yep. And they're the same village and the same families, right? So as a way, we've talked about a lot of the problems. We only have a few minutes left. As a way to kind of get beyond some of those problems with either veranda or armchair anthropology. What is the modern version of anthropology all about? Somebody's already said it. I think it's Ethan. So we had armchair, we had veranda, and that's the third one. No. Participant observation. Yeah.
Participant observation.
And how might participant observation help you get around some of those problems that we've discussed? Yeah, Ethan. Right. So if I am a veranda anthropologist, I drive out during the day, I want to study people's religion, I make sure to go to Sunday service because that's a big part of religion. I might only get certain things versus if I live there at night, maybe I get other things. Yeah. Yep.
In church, you just, like every other week, just take notes about the service, and then you just leave without talking to anyone.
Yep.
You're not gonna get as much of an idea about what that was. As if you actually participated in church things.
Yeah, you went to the potluck and stuff like that. You went to their Christmas thing at night, right? They have the 12 days of Christmas every year at midnight and stuff that you can go to, like different things. And you might get more understanding. You might also see how things that people say and what they do don't match up, right? If you go there and the preacher says, don't drink alcohol, you're going to hell, and you only go to church, that's all you see. But if you see him on Thursday night drunk and passed out in the ditch, right, maybe you can see that there's a disconnect there that you wouldn't get if you just asked somebody. Yeah.
Like there's a big, like, imagine just straight up asking someone from that church, how does being a Christian affect your life?
Uh-huh.
There's a big difference in the answer you're gonna get between going to church once every other week just to take notes and actually participating.
Yeah, definitely, right? And so hopefully, you know, participant observation gets you beyond that discrepancy. It also builds rapport, like I talked about before. People have, when you do research, there's like these tiers of research, right? So when I first got there, it's like, we talked about Clifford Geertz and the Balinese cockfight, right? Where he, you know, goes to this place and nobody wants to talk to him and they don't give him the time of day until he goes to see this rooster fighting event that they have, and the cops come and bust it up and he has to like hide and be conspiratorial with these people in the village. And then they're like, yeah, you're one of us. You're not one of those cops because you ran, right? And that was like his big coming to the field story. Of similar, most ethnographers have that, right? When you show up, people don't want to talk to you. Who are you? People always ask me if I was CIA. It's like, do I look like CIA? Like, you have any idea what these, I don't have a suit. Like, what am I doing here, right? But like, why are you here? Why would anyone be here? We're the end, literally the end of the road. Like, you can't drive any further on the road in Belize. After this, you walk 5 miles through the jungle and you're in Guatemala. Like, it doesn't get any further. Why are you here? You know, and you can't get anything in the early stage. You get like basic stuff, like this is how they make tortillas. And like, I did a ton of like drawing pictures of how people build houses and stuff. And like, what are the names for the different sticks and you build a house? Because nobody would talk to me, right? And then there was an event, and this is because there had been a thing earlier where some Maya children had disappeared, right? And they had blamed these white people in the town, said that they had captured them, sold their organs on the black market, and fed them to crocodiles. It's not a great time to be an ethnographer when you roll into town and the people are rioting in the streets that week. This is not going to be good. You know, children like see you in the village and they run screaming from you because they're afraid that you're going to like sell their organs and stuff. But then about a month and a half later, right, people started to warm up to us after there was a house fire across the street. And neighbors were like, you want to go see the house fire? I'm like, sure, why not? We go there and everyone's standing around watching, and we jump in and axes and machetes and buckets of water and put out this house fire, keep it from spreading and burning all the other thatched buildings in the community. And then people who I had no idea who they were, people who'd never spoken to me, were suddenly like, oh, hey, Eric, you want to come to dinner? Like, knew all about me, knew my family, knew where I was and who I was doing, what my mission was. What happened? What do you think happened? Why did it suddenly change like a light switch?
They were originally talking to.
Yeah, everyone talks about you. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm here. I did that.
Yeah.
They usually make it so long and after this couple of months, I kind of realized, hey, this guy's actually good, he's not trying to steal like this.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we do in anthropology. We spend a long time. We're going to spend a semester on this project, but usually if you're doing a master's project, you do a summer worth of research. And if you're doing a PhD, you do at least a year, sometimes 2. I had a professor who did 5. I had a professor who never came back. He just lived there with his, he married into this, he did his research in the Amazon and ended up marrying this girl from there. And then he moved back with her to teach. And then the whole tribe came and camped in his backyard. So he moved back to the rainforest and just lives there now because it was too hard. But we do long-term research and it gets better every time. Why do you think I did a year of field work and I was like, I'm in, this is great. Like, these people know me, they like me, they'll tell me all kinds of cool stuff. This is great. And then Becky Zarger, who's at USF, Baines's advisor, was like, nah, you don't know anything. You don't know anybody here. Wait till you come back. And I was mad. I was like, you don't know me. People love me, right? And then like I came back the next time and it was totally different. People were like, oh, you're like access to all kinds of things that you never had access to before. People who you only vaguely talked to last time were like, I want to be best buds now and like have you be their godparent for their kids and stuff. Why do you think that after being gone for 3 years and then coming back for another year, why do you think that those relationships were better? What do you think happened?
Time makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, right. You came back, right? You weren't one of those people who just like, see you later. I got my research. I'm gone, right? And I had done stuff for the community over time. I'd written grants. They got a $1 million grant. We had done other smaller grants for pigs and stuff. And so like, oh, it's that guy. You're back, Henry. Like, not Henry, but close enough, right? Yeah.
Well, like what I was saying earlier about like the difference between church and taking notes versus actually participating in church.
Yep.
People are a lot more open with people that they think actually care than people who they think are just there for a specific.
Yeah, and a lot of places that you're going to do research, whether it's rural New Mexico or Belize third world, have these like development interventions come in. People are like, I'm going to fix your water. I'm going to fix the number of, diabetes cases in this community. I'm going to help early childhood education. And then they do their little project and they leave. So if you can kind of like put yourself in those communities through participant observation, especially long-term follow-up, participant observation, then it helps really not only connect you with those people, but also really helps your data. You're going to get a lot better data than if you would have, done something quicker or not really spent time to build those relationships. Well, we are out of time, and I only got through the first point on my notepad. So there'll be plenty to talk about on Monday. Thanks so much for coming out.